Hello and welcome to the Nerds Now Playing podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things nerdy, that's movies, video games, and entertainment in general. I'm Tim, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Devin. Devin, how are you today?
I'm doing very good, Tim. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. It is a fantastic Friday. It's cold, but I'm all right with that. By the way, do you know what today is?
Today, well, we are at the office wearing a lot of green today. Does that give a clue?
Well, it shouldn't because that's a week out.
Oh, okay.
But I was more referring to the actual date, which is March 10th, which is also,
oh,
it's a Mario Day.
Oh, I forgot all about Mario Day.
You forgot about Mario Day? You're like the ultimate Nintendo nerd.
I remembered it the previous 9 days, but not today.
That means that you failed miserably. Mario is disappointed in you.
I'm disappointed in me too. I'm sorry, Mario. I'm sorry.
You should be.
I really Waluigi'd that.
He will now... because you're wearing green, you are his new Yoshi.
That's really bumming me out now. I forgot that was Mario Day.
That's my ultimate goal, is to bring you down.
I was hoping on Mario Day to play some Mario games, and I don't know if I'll be able to today.
At all? Like, do you have no time at home?
When I get off today, I have some things I got to go do, and then I got a date night, but which maybe could include Mario now that I know it's Mario Day, but we'll see how that goes.
So you can play Mario Party and lose against the computer because the computer always wins.
The computer always wins. Yeah.
It cheats.
It does cheat. Well,
every time.
Since I forgot all about Mario Day, do we want to talk? Is there something we need to be saying about Mario?
Well, a new trailer just dropped for the new movie.
It did, and we were talking about that before the show.
We were.
You saw it, and I haven't yet, and I'm not sure if I will. But you had some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think this new trailer. I mean, and I'm starting to get to a point where I feel like trailers do tend to ruin things to a certain degree, which I know is why partly I think why you're not planning to watch the new trailer. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know I'm going to see the movie, and so with trailers sometimes. Like, I don't need to be sold on it anymore.
Gotcha.
I want to watch it. And so now it's kind of spoiling some things for me. So I want to come in a little bit as blind as possible, even though I've seen the previous two trailers.
Yeah.
I think I get what's going on in the movie now, but...
For sure.
Yeah.
I ended up watching it last night, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I still think the best part of this movie is 100% going to be Jack Black as Bowser.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I'm still not sold as Chris Pratt on Mario. I don't think anybody really is. Which is why they're not showing him much in the trailers. I'm
not super excited either. We'll have to see. I've read some interviews from the producers, I think, where they're saying that they're hinting at maybe there's a reason why they cast him other than the obvious
just his popularity.
Obvious probably points of casting Chris Pratt in anything. But I don't know. We'll have to see because I wasn't really sold on that. I like Charlie Day as Luigi.
As Luigi. I think he's a great call.
That. Who is playing Princess Peach?
Isn't it Anna Taylor-Joy?
It is. Thank you.
Yeah. I think she'll do okay, although I don't know. Seeing or hearing her voice with Peach, there was kind of a disconnect for me there.
It worked for me, but I think Peach... doesn't like Luigi and Mario, they have very distinct voices, I think. So I don't think Peach has a super distinct voice other than her
other than it being high pitched and kind of squeaky.
So I feel like a lot of different actresses could pull that off. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's fair. How do you feel about Toad? Is that Keegan-Michael Key?
Yeah. Yes.
How do you feel? I don't remember if he's actually doing the Toad voice or not.
He is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I don't even want to imagine what that's like in the studio, having to be that high pitched and for lack of a better way to put it, scratchy.
I think it sounds like they're probably doing some modulation to his voice.
That might be it.
Some kind of pitch tone change, but unless he's really squeaky Toad voice like that. But,
I mean, some people can do it. I'm not one of those people.
But I'm excited about a lot of the casts, minus Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna see the movie. I'm really excited to see what they're doing with some of that. The last trailer I did see, it's going to be really cool seeing some of the past games be incorporated into it, into the movie. So I
know they're bringing in Mario Kart is a big one. It seems like they're bringing in Super Smash Bros. At least a little bit from one of the trailers. But we should probably move on to getting into the rest of the stuff. Anything else as far as like what you've watched this week?
I was going to mention there's a movie called Where the Crawdads Sing. Have you heard of this film?
The title sounds familiar.
I don't know. I don't know if it was up for any awards or anything. I think it was it's from a book, and some other of my friends had watched it, and I just watched it last night for the first time.
Oh,
And,
gotcha.
So it's about time jumps a little bit. Same character of Kaya, who grows up in the marshes of North Carolina. She has an abusive father.
Oh, wow.
An abusive father who causes her family to leave. But she grows up living in the Marsh house. Her mom left because of the abusive father.
Right.
Her other siblings also left because of the abusive father, and then the father leaves as well. So she's by herself. She raises herself basically, and alone in this house on this Marsh house, and they call her the Marsh Girl. But the movie kind of is centered around it's not fully a courtroom drama, but the overall story is about whether or not she committed a murder. Somebody is found murdered in the marsh, a former boyfriend of hers, and at the beginning of the movie, and the movie is about it has the courtroom drama of whether or not she's been guilty or not, but she's also they go into some of the backstory of her life and leading up to the events. So it starts with them apprehending her at the beginning for the murder, but then it goes back in time to kind of like fill in her timeline of events. And so, and it's also kind of like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a full romance movie, but it has like, there's like some love triangle kind of things going on throughout it, but it's also, so it's kind of a courtroom drama, romance movie, murder mystery kind of movie set in the marshes of North Carolina. It takes place, time jumps between the 1950s and 1960s.
Oh, okay.
Of her young life, and pretty interesting movie because they like trying to find out whether or not she's guilty or not of this, and it kind of like takes you by surprise in some of the parts of the movie. But that was where the Crawdads Sing. I think it was a pretty good movie. Not very rated very well, it looks like, but one that I found kind of a lot of enjoyment out of. If you like courtroom dramas and kind of like murder mystery.
And what is this on?
This was on, I believe, I don't remember. It was either on Amazon Prime or HBO Now.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I can't remember.
Well, I'll definitely have to check that out. Other than that, this week, the only thing I've watched that's new, I did rewatch History of the World Part 1, the Mel Brooks film. And mainly because this past Monday, the new Hulu show, History of the World Part 2.
Oh, yeah.
It is 8 episodes. I've only gotten a chance to watch the first one, but I've enjoyed it so far. I mean, it's sketch comedy style of things, so it's enjoyable so far.
And so did you say you rewatched the first one? Mm-hmm. It's been a while since I've seen that, but I remember liking it a great deal. There's some really great bits in there, Mel Brooks.
Oh yeah, it's there's a lot of I think for me, like upon rewatching it, some of the humor is a little hit or miss, just because of how things have, humor is one of the things that never usually ages as well, and so there are certain things in that movie that don't quite age for me as well, and because it's a sketch comedy movie, it's a little, disjointed, so it's lower ranked on my list of Mel Brooks films for a lot of those reasons. But I do still like a lot of the humor. Probably my favorite part is the Inquisition part, just because it's like this huge musical number. So I really like that one. But before we get to our movie review today, we should do our mini topic, since we haven't gotten to it yet. And we are talking today about science fiction, a specific science fiction movie. So Devin, out of curiosity, Star Wars or Star Trek?
That is a very important intellectual question to be had, and that's sparked many debates. And it's worth mentioning that this is coming out because our review today is going to be of Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Oh yeah, I am so ready.
And and so one of the things we're going to touch on is Star Trek versus Star Wars. Now, that's going to be an interesting question to me because I grew up mostly with Star Wars. I think
the opposite for me.
I think mostly because I like the Next Generation, the show. That's where I like watched the most Star Trek, and I have there's I don't remember how many episodes of the original series. I want to say like 90.
Probably it's usually about 24 episodes per season and 3 seasons.
Because I think there's like even 30 episodes,
There might be.
but I don't want to. I don't know. I think I've seen the first third of the original series, and then I kind of like dropped off because of life or whatever. But so I've seen that many of the original series, but I saw that original series a lot later in life.
Oh, right.
So-
well, neither of us were alive at the time that show was airing.
But to the main question of Star Wars or Star Trek, like that is really hard because both series has pros and cons, but they're also like to me very distinct genres,
Well, that's true. Star Wars is science fantasy. Star Trek is science fiction.
right? And so it just really kind of depends on where you lean on that. So because I like science fiction a lot, like as a genre, and I think I would probably say I like that more than science fantasy. I would say, but I would probably have to go with the original trilogy of Star Wars. That's my thing. That's
So gut reaction for you is Star Wars.
yeah,
Okay.
gut reaction. Yeah,
For me, it is hands down Star Trek. I was raised on Star Trek. I mean, I watched the original series of Star Wars as well, but I was raised in the movie. It looks like our producer has. Oh, our producer is also a fellow Trekkie. He was doing the "Live Long and Prosper" sign. Heck yeah. But yeah, so I was raised on Star Trek. I one of my earliest memories actually is a particular scene from Wrath of Khan near the very end where he's like burnt and bloodied and spouting quotes from Moby Dick as he's about to try and launch the Genesis device, which I don't know if that says anything about me and my memories. But so I grew up watching the movies instead of the shows. And so I have a lot of fondness for the TOS movies and the TNG movies, most of them. Nemesis is still garbage. I think that's pretty undisputed amongst fans.
So when you grew up with it, but what did you watch first? Did you watch the original series first?
No. I watched the original. I watched the original series movies first.
Oh, I see.
So I never actually got a chance to see much of the series, of any of the series, until they were available on Netflix, which is actually the entire reason I originally got Netflix, because all the series were on there, and that was probably about when I was in high school, getting into college. So for me, hands down, I like that Star Wars seems so black and white in terms of like these are clearly the people you're meant to sympathize with. They're quote unquote the good guys, and these are the bad guys. And there's space magic, which I don't know why I'm doing air quotes. Like there's parts of it I do enjoy Star Wars, but what I like about Star Trek, and I think our producer agrees, is that there's a lot of it comes down to the hope of things. You know, Star Trek is very much built around, you know, if we get to a point in our existence as a human race where we can put aside all our petty differences and work for the betterment of mankind, or betterment of not only our species but other species, which is why the Federation is founded.
But counter argument to that, Star Wars
Has laser swords?
has A New Hope. You know, so
A New Hope. Star Trek has more than one hope.
but do they have enough hope to name an episode Hope something?
I'm sure there's an episode somewhere that has hope in the title. More than likely. But it also has there's just, to me, there's better character development across. I mean, Star Trek just has more interesting characters to me. It's not just, you know, if I'm going gut reaction, it's Star Trek for me.
So to break it down a little bit more for me, like Star Wars, the original trilogy, and I'm going to say the original trilogy because that was the first Star Wars I watched. It definitely has, that's 3 movies. It has the hero's journey throughout it. There's definitely those movies is a complete story told between 3 movies. In Star Trek, though, each story has either a moral dilemma. It has something that kind of something philosophical for you to think about. So there's pros for me for both of those, because the hero's journey that takes place in Star Wars, I like that. I like what's happening there. You said there's space magic. Well, there's space magic in Star Trek. Come on, there's characters who can do all kinds of bonkers things. So like,
I mean, it's explained through science, though.
yeah, it is explained through science. You're right. Whereas Star Wars, they just wave their hand and
It's more of
you
it's not
understand.
really explained unless you like metachlorians.
I love them. Yeah,
Do you have a big old bowl of metachlorians for
Yep,
breakfast?
they go. Yep, and you can brew them as a tea.
I think a lot of fans would not. I don't know. I don't have anything necessarily against the midichlorian thing. I don't know. For me, it just Star Trek. You mentioned the kind of more cerebral. I mean, you didn't use the word, but that is kind of more where Star Trek lies, and I think to me that's more interesting. Like I'll sit and watch. I'd rather sit and watch that than one person's like the struggle against this overarching like tyrannical government.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just more interesting to me, like having like a conversation, trying to figure out the moral aspect of this thing. There's like one of the best episodes in the entirety of Star Trek is Measure of Man, which is a TNG episode, and that's the one where they have to debate whether or not Data is property of the Federation or if he is his own entity and has rights. And there's not, I guess, a lot of drama per se. I mean, like, there's no battles
Yeah.
in that other than like battle of words and concepts. And I don't know, something with that just resonates more with me.
Yeah, and I could see that. And but I like the Next Generation was what I watched first. I really like if I was to say the movies, I'd Star Wars. Like I think they're so good.
That's fair.
The original trilogy at least is so good. That's what I grew up with watching. I was late to watching any of the Star Trek films of the original series, and I don't think I've seen very much of the Next Generation movies either. That just wasn't something I latched onto movie watching wise. So it's a little hard for me to say definitively which one would be the winner, but it's Star Wars. So
For you, yes.
Yeah.
For me, Star Trek. Live long and prosper. Well, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with our movie review of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And we're back, and now it is time for the review of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba, bum. Ba-da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. If you can't tell, I'm very excited. I like Star Trek.
I'm excited for you for being excited.
Oh, yeah.
So Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Tim, what is this movie about?
The basic rundown is this massive alien spacecraft of enormous power destroys at the start of it 3 Klingon vessels, and it starts making its way towards Federation space. And Admiral James T. Kirk is ordered to take command of the USS Enterprise to try and confront this, as they call it in the movie, intruder, and try and figure out what it is. On the way, as it's inching its way closer to Earth, it takes out the space station Epsilon 9, and they go into it. So they start inching towards it, and the only spacecraft near, unfortunately, this entity is the USS Enterprise. So they go towards it, and Kirk rounds up the rest of his crew, all the original cast of the original show, and he acquires some new members, and they set off to intercept this alien spacecraft. However, it has been several years since Kirk last went into deep space. Is he up to the task of defending Earth?
And we will see, and we did see actually since we watched it.
We did.
And
I hope we watched it.
I think he was up to the task.
I would say so. I mean, it's rare that Kirk ever fails. I mean, technically, he never actually failed his Kobayashi Maru test, which any Star Trek nerd will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so Devin, to start off with, what are your just general thoughts on this movie?
Okay, so I had a couple general thoughts. So I thought I had seen this movie before. Turns out I did not. I don't know why. I thought maybe with our movie group we had watched it at one point. So I was surprised pleasantly that I never seen it before.
Oh, good.
I have seen some of the other original series movies.
Oh yeah, Wrath of Khan and Voyage Home, probably.
The whale one.
That's Voyage Home.
Okay, Voyage Home.
That's number 4.
So I've at least definitively seen 2. I would have to think on the other ones. But
Well, you got to watch Search for Spock. It's part of the Genesis trilogy.
I do if I haven't. Yeah, I do. So, but I haven't seen this one. So I went into it very blind.
Good.
And it's been a while since I've seen the original series too.
Ah, yeah.
And which I actually think helps because this movie takes place, at least narratively, takes place 4 years after the last episode of the original series. And when did this movie come out?
1979.
1979.
Robert Weiss directed this film. And by the way, fun fact about this movie: this movie went to theaters a little unfinished.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, so at the time they ran out of both actual time and budget because they were on a strict release date from Paramount, and so the part that was unfinished primarily was a lot of the visual effects that they wanted to do near the end of the film, and so Robert Weiss didn't actually even have time to vet the film in front of a crowd or anything. So he got a first print and then it went to theaters.
Which I think he hand delivered to the premiere.
Yes, I believe he did. And so I think like it got a generally like decent response, but the main one is mostly that this movie is a slow burn for sure. But he did years later, I think 2001, he was granted a bit of a stipend to finish the film the way he wanted to. So that included several VFX shots that were included.
And so this was the director's cut that we watched.
Yes.
And so this would be the more completed version. And I don't have the context of what the theatrical version looked like. So I don't know if my takeaways like this is a better movie or not. But but it is the director's cut. And so the movie takes place 4 years narratively after the previous one, and maybe 13 years after the actual show wrapped up.
I believe it's a full decade after the original show wrapped.
So my impressions of the movie are one, since this is the motion picture film, I can see the grand cinematic version. This is like a very well done, polished episode maybe of the original series, I think. And I think that kind of like had some pros and cons to it, I think, or in terms of execution a little bit. But since I haven't seen the original series in a little while, the movie does, all the characters are in there, are doing their own thing, they're kind of spread out. They're not fully part of the Enterprise anymore, and with this anomaly that's happening out in space, those circumstances cause them to all have to team up again, or take group up again on the Enterprise so they can handle the situation.
Yeah.
So you get kind of these character introductions again. In some ways, they're like getting to see each other for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
And I could kind of like feel that sense of these characters meeting up with an old friend you haven't seen in a while. And so I kind of got that sense a little bit, even though I hadn't seen all the original series.
Right.
I hadn't seen that in a while. And jumping into this movie that I hadn't seen I've never seen this movie, but I can kind of see those relationships, and I kind of liked that a lot. Everyone's seeing each other for the first time again. They got this task, and one of the things I liked about the show is how like the crew deals with like interpersonal situations. Kirk is recruited to be the captain again on the ship, and he has to tell the previous captain, Decker. I think Captain Decker,
Commander or ends up being Commander Decker. But yeah, he was supposed to be captain, and then kind of took over.
So like there's a lot of dynamics in the story that like Captain Decker does not like the fact that he's being replaced. So Captain Kirk has to navigate the problem at hand with the anomaly that's approaching Earth, and there's problems with that. But he also has to deal with the crew, their personalities, their little problems that they have amongst each other. So like you get to like see the supervisor role of the ship that I kind of like that the Star Trek series kind of deals with.
I never really thought about it in that context, but yeah, you're right.
So those are the kind of like things of Star Trek that I really kind of personally enjoy. And I liked seeing this as the film, like everything's like it's like a high def version of the TV show. So you're seeing things with extra clarity and detail.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things about this movie that like I like for that reason. So overall, like it does seem like what I'd say a good episode of the original Star Trek series. I don't know if I would say this is like a super great film overall, maybe
Yeah.
narratively. But that's just some of my initial thoughts. It's like it's a very, very well done episode, maybe, and with a great score and seeing the characters again for the first time.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback off that, so for me, like I like this movie a lot overall. I like a lot about it. You mentioned the score. I think Jerry Goldsmith's score is absolutely gorgeous, and the main theme that was written for this is actually, as we were kind of humming it at the beginning of this of our review, you probably recognize that theme as the theme for Star Trek: The Next Generation. That is because Gene Roddenberry, when he heard this, loved it so much that not only did he use it for some of the other movies, including this one. He used it as the main theme for The Next Generation. So that score is just super iconic. Not to mention, this is also the movie that has kind of the first instance of the theme for the Klingons coming in, which I really love. So musically, I think this score is absolutely gorgeous. And I think that's one of the things that works in favor of this movie. I like, as I kind of mentioned before in this episode, I like the kind of more cerebral nature of this particular movie because there's not really any battles that are happening.
No battles, and in fact, I think I read that, and it got my attention to the fact that I don't think the Enterprise fires their photon
Photon torpedoes.
photon torpedoes once in the movie.
Well, they do one time
Oh, they do. Okay.
when they're so. But not at something per se. It's but when they're trapped in the wormhole section.
It's definitely in a way that this is not an action movie.
Right.
So,
By no means an action movie.
yeah.
So I think for me, I love the score. I like seeing the characters again. And I like one of the biggest parts of this movie, and probably the thing it's more well known for, is the visuals. So this movie went really hard on the visual effects and trying to bring this grand scale of everything that's happening. Not only like you have, it's like 5 minutes worth of shots of the exterior of the Enterprise when they're first getting into it, because this is like the motion picture. It's one of the earliest trying to be like another blockbuster science fiction film. After because this movie came out 2 years after the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that Gene Roddenberry didn't want to do was make it feel like they were kind of trying to cash in on the success of that. And so that's one of the reasons why they went with like no battles and to try and make it more cerebral. So in that way, it, like you mentioned, it kind of feels like an extended Star Wars. I'm sad at myself for saying that now. It feels like an extended episode of the original series.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of feel like that works. I like that. I like a lot about that. Like I said, the visuals, especially when they get inside the alien spacecraft, I'm wide-eyed every time I see it. And I haven't seen it a lot necessarily, but I'm fascinated by the visuals that they pulled off.
So that's like a two-sided coin for me when I was watching this. On one hand, the visuals really did stick out to me. So I'm guessing these are large miniatures of the ship.
Yeah.
Stuff they're doing. So they do a lot of these shots of the exterior of the Enterprise, and it does make it seem pretty grand, I think. It's like this is a huge ship, and it means something, that we've been with this ship for however many episodes of the original series. So this ship carries a lot of weight in terms of history and stuff for us. But there was a point in the movie, like this movie is very like, there's parts of it that are very drawn out, and like I was kind of like watching my watch a little bit, because we had some of these shots of the ship and stuff, and they just kept going and they keep going and going. In fact, even when the movie starts, I don't know if you remembered, but it has a star field for like 5 minutes also.
Oh yeah, before the Paramount logo even comes in.
Before the Paramount logo even comes on, they
Yeah,
have
you're right.
the star field up for a while, and like there's one like part of it like I like, because it's like setting the mood. It's like it's already like calming you down. It's like slowing things down, because this isn't going to be a fast paced action movie. This is like a thinker's movie, maybe.
Yeah.
And so but it's like also like, come on, let's get going here. And then the Paramount logo comes up, and then more space, and then a bajillion shots of the Enterprise. Well, I think the Klingon thing happens first.
It probably does. Which, by the way, this is the first instance that you see what would become the iconic design for the Klingons. They were redesigned for this movie. because in the original series I didn't have much of a budget,
Yeah.
which is why Spock only has pointy ears. That's and so they redesigned the Klingons look for this, with the head ridges and everything.
Yep.
And so it's the first time it's seen on screen, and it doesn't look quite as good as it will later on, but I just think it's cool that they were able to start kind of pulling that off and starting giving them a lot more character.
I really wish there was more Klingon somehow. I don't like, obviously they had they encountered this entity in space. I'm calling it entity. I don't know if there's a better word for it. But
we could refer to it by what it's actually called in the movie. V'ger.
V'ger, yes. So V'ger is this. What would it be? Like
the best way to describe it, probably a
mechanical space cloud.
Well, so the cloud is just kind of dissipating around it. Like there's an actual ship that V'ger is in. I would call it a living mechanism almost. Like
I'd agree.
Like
with
a
that.
machine with a soul.
Yeah.
Or maybe not a soul, but like a machine with sentience. We'll put it that way.
Yep. That's
a living machine.
That's right.
And so I forgot where you were going with there for a second.
Where was I going with that? But,
you were talking about the slow burn.
Well, yeah, it's a very slow. It's kind of like a slow burn. It's a very slow burn. Almost like, for me, it was like almost too much. Like I'm ready to get things moving along. But,
you mentioned you want to see more of the Klingons. That's what it was.
Yep.
You see these Klingons encountering just like the external part, this whole cloud that's kind of surrounding the V'ger ship. And also another fun fact about that: the Klingon commander in that ship, the Klingon captain, was played by Mark Leonard, who has played 3 different characters throughout Star Trek. Probably most well known for playing Surak, who is, Sarek, who is Spock's father. But he also played a Romulan commander in the original series.
That's blasphemy.
It is. So he's played both a Romulan and a Vulcan, and also a Klingon. But yeah, no, I agree. Like, so you only see them at the very beginning of this movie as they encounter this thing and they try to attack it, and they end up getting what kind of looks like vaporized. And the same thing is what happens to the Epsilon 9 station as the V'ger ship goes towards it. Some of the things, as far as like getting into this movie, that I feel like the characters are a little underutilized, and that is a lot because with the grand scale of all these visuals, it feels like they were going so hard on that they didn't write as much for the characters to be who they are in the original series. And I think what I read was that a lot of the main cast kind of felt similar. They felt like they weren't getting the chance to do what they were familiar with. And so for me, that's kind of the main bummer with this movie.
And on that topic, since you brought it up, I didn't think about it too much while I was watching it, but there are a lot of characters that just, they kind of come in, they say some quips or some lines, and then they're just like pushed aside. It's very much like, and I don't even know if I would say it's very much like Kirk's story. He's like the experienced captain who's brought back on after 2 years or so of not running the ship.
Right.
So there was a theme there for me of like the times have kind of moved on without him a little bit, because this new ship apparently was upgraded and all that stuff, but they didn't really like fully, I felt like, hit on that theme. It was like kind of there at the beginning and then pushed aside a little bit. But that was for his character. Yeah, but I think some of the other characters,
like the original main crew, like Chekhov, Sulu, Uhura, Scotty, even Bones and Spock don't really get to do very much in this. I mean, Spock gets a little bit more, but like most of them are just kind of there. Like they're not really seen a lot. They have very little dialogue.
Did you say Scotty? That's the
engineer.
Engineer.
Yeah.
He's
really only in the beginning of the movie.
I think we might check in with him a couple times where he says like the shields are down or don't do X for a brief second, and so he's only at his station ever. So I do feel a little bit about that, because there's all these rich characters to pull from. So I can see there's a dilemma of how do you incorporate all of them, and but they are underutilized I thought a little bit.
I mean, it's really only like Kirk is used and Spock is really used. Bones is also just kind of there occasionally. Um, and I mean, then you have the new characters, which are Decker and Lieutenant Ilea, who ends up. She has a bigger role because she ends up being probed and kind of scanned in a similar way to the Klingon ships by V'ger, and then she becomes the surrogate for V'ger to be able to communicate with the Enterprise and her crew. As V'ger tries to understand what they are, because V'ger does not, as a living machine, does not understand humans, or as they put it, carbon-based units. And I don't know. What did you like her character? How do you feel about her character in Decker?
So I guess they had a history a little bit. So when we get everyone's on the ship, Kirk has assumed control of the ship. We've now seen all of the characters. We have the threat of V'ger is out in space somewhere, and V'ger is approaching Earth. Yeah, they have a limited timetable of dealing with that before it reaches Earth, and they're not sure why that's going on. And Decker being the previous captain, and help me out, Tim. What was her name?
Lieutenant Ilea?
Ilea, yes.
The Deltan.
Yep. They have a history, and I thought it was a little interesting. But so these are two new characters in the show, and so we are given a little bit of backstory that they've had a relationship of some kind, and he apparently broke it off, and went and did space things, and left her behind. So, but I didn't really. So the question is like, whether do I like them or not, or something.
Like, it's just in general as a character. How do you feel about them?
They're kind of like a little undeveloped. I thought they had a relationship of some kind previously, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ilea is. I didn't get much from her as a character. Like, she has what did they say in the movie? They give off some kind of
well, they don't actually say it in the movie. It's one of the things that I was reading in the
okay,
in the kind of the trivia of the characters.
I see.
So Deltans apparently give off such strong pheromones that people can't help but be sexually attracted to them, and so that's one of the reasons why they're not really a huge part of Starfleet, and why most humans especially aren't around them, because they can't really handle being around that.
So I guess you mentioned that backstory. They don't really hit on that at all in the movie.
Not in the film.
That seems like a really if they did that, they would have to go all the way with that fact. But
my brother and I were actually talking about this week. Star Trek can get kind of thirsty sometimes.
Yeah,
especially the original series with Kirk. Oh my gosh!
Well, you're traveling around space, going port to port. I could see that, but Decker being the previous captain, he wants to be the captain. Yeah. So there's a power.
There's a power struggle
thing
there.
With him. Yeah. With Ilea, I don't know. She's
just kind of there.
Would you say that she was resentful towards Decker about? She played off really professional. She was you screwed up, boy.
I would say I didn't really sense that there was a lot of drama between them. I feel like she took it in stride, being okay, you made a choice, and so we're done. And I mean, and it's not long after that she ends up being probed by V'ger and basically reborn as a probe for V'ger, being rebuilt.
So V'ger being the
living machine,
in space, abducts this character of Ilea, and turns her into a what did they say?
They called her a probe.
A probe.
Basically a probe. But one so well constructed that not only does it have her brain waves and patterns, but her thought patterns and even some of her memories. So kind of somewhere deep down, there are certain elements. There's moments where one of the biggest parts about this probe, the Ilea probe, is that it's so logical. It doesn't see the point of carbon-based units, which is why it's planning to destroy Earth. So I guess I should say, one of the main reasons why you find out V'ger is heading towards Earth is because it wants to connect with its creator. And it's been trying to send signals that haven't been returned. and so it assumes that the creator is dead or gone. And so it sees carbon-based units because it's a living machine. Anything that's not, it sees as kind of an infestation. And so that's part of the reason why like the timetable is so ramped up for them to try and solve what's going on.
Tim, what do you say we get into maybe a little more spoilers on the movie?
Yeah, that's probably a good
then
time
then
since
I
I'm
think
starting to get into that now.
Yeah, I think we could like delve into a little bit deeper stuff by doing that. Okay, so V'ger turns out to be Voyager.
Yes, Voyager 6. It ends up being an old NASA, almost like a NASA satellite that was sent out to learn all it could and then send that information back. And what you find out once they realize what it is, they were able to kind of go back into the history and remember. And so what ended up happening is that it was sent out and then it just kind of disappeared. So it basically fell through a black hole and ended up on conceivably the other side of the universe, or the other side of the galaxy at the very least. And they never saw it again. And so it ended up being found by some kind of planet where living machines are the main inhabitants, and they kind of felt it was almost like a kindred spirit. So they were able to construct the whole ship around V'ger to help it fulfill its purpose. Which it's I don't know if you know much about the Borg, so it's kind of accepted amongst the community that this home planet that V'ger went to is potentially the home planet of the Borg.
Interesting.
Probably in the Delta Quadrant.
Interesting.
Which I think that's pretty plausible. I like that as an idea in general.
So V'ger turns out to be Voyager 6 from Earth. And when I was watching it, the first thought I had was like, why didn't they just make it Voyager 2 or Voyager 1? I think that was a missed opportunity could have been so cool to tie it.
Why so?
Well, because Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 actually exist. And Voyager 6 is like a made up probe. I was wondering if maybe they did that because the Voyager 1 and 2 didn't technically do what Voyager 6 was said to do.
Oh, maybe so.
But then I was thinking, like, does it really matter? I mean, because Voyager 1 and 2 have instruments that can do readings of certain kinds. But
right.
I wish it was Voyager 1 or 2 because that one actually exists. And that would have been like a cool, like, I don't know, alternate future made up history.
Ooh, okay. I can see that. That'd be a really cool tie-in if they did that.
Like, so I was like, it's just a number that they messed up on. But unless there's a better reason for having it 6, which I don't know, because I think it would have been really neat because this came out in 1979.
Correct.
And Voyager had been in space for some time. I don't know where it would have been in our galaxy, but how cool would have that been as an audience member to be like, because this movie takes place in 300 years into the future?
It would be the 23rd century, I believe.
And so how neat would have that been? Like they stumble upon something that was released into space relatively recently in 1979.
That would have been cool.
And they make this like other like meta science fiction story around that.
Okay, I could see that. That's something like
just to butt in super fast as a resident space geek over here. So Voyager was very much in the news when this came out. Voyager 1 and 2 had just been launched and they were going into deep space. And I'm guessing that they were assuming that there was going to be a 3 and a 4 and maybe more after that. And so it could be that was kind of why, they were just trying to be current with their naming. So anyway, that's my space geek moment. Thanks.
Thank you, producer Gus. Yeah, that's kind of cool, actually. I mean, I could dig that too. Why they would maybe go for that. As someone who's not a huge space, like I love science fiction, but I'm not a huge geek for space. So like I didn't know that there was a Voyager 1 and 2.
Hey, there's a Voyager 1 and 2. And which you should look up then if you don't know that, know much about Voyager 1 and 2. One of the two, I think is getting close to reaching interstellar space, unless it has already.
Sorry, space geek again. Yes, it has. There's different boundaries that define that like there's not just one boundary that's suddenly interstellar space, and it has crossed several of those, and both of them now are like billions of miles away, and are running on their last juices and might already be dead. So
Oh wow.
yeah, they're very lonely and sad.
Well, man, that makes me feel even more sad for V'ger. Although it's like, so one of the points that they make in this movie is that not only is V'ger looking for its creator, which it knows was from Earth, because that's what we're supposed to transmit all its data. It feels, Gus mentions it being these ones kind of being so far out, almost like alone. V'ger feels very alone, and like not knowing. There's a moment where Spock, he ends up trying to mind meld with V'ger,
Yeah.
to find out what is happening and why it's doing what it's doing, to the point where, and I guess I should say before this, Spock was going through the Kolnar, which is a ritual on Vulcan to purge all emotion. And so he ends up wanting to join the crew because he not only did he feel kind of the entity reaching out, but he was searching for answers for himself. And so by mind melding with V'ger and just seeing how cold and emotionless V'ger is, because it's just a machine and only basing everything off of logic, it kind of skews his perspective in a way that he kind of reconnects with the main characters, with Kirk and with Bones, a little bit better. And through kind of understanding that he finds what he's looking for personally, and kind of finds out that V'ger is not only looking for the creator but trying to understand its purpose. Like specifically, the line that's mentioned is this all that I am? Am I meant for anything more? Because along its journey, because it's seen such a vast amount of information and done this, it's grown. Its intelligence has grown to the point where it gained sentience. And which is why it's considered a living machine at that point. And you end up finding, so it comes to Earth and wanting to find the creator, and you end up finding that they try and transmit the actual old NASA code, but they withhold that information from V'ger so that they can try and stop it or to bargain with it for it to not destroy Earth.
Now in that bargaining that they do, that's another part of the series that I like. They're the problem solving that they're trying to do, because if they screw it up, they risk their lives, the ship, and everything. So they're like, there's a balancing act, and they're like negotiating a little bit with V'ger. They don't want to just give the information.
Oh yeah,
because then they'll have played their hand and stuff. So those are the things of the show even that I like. That it's this. They have to like problem solve through this, and that was kind of a thing I really liked about that. I wanted to mention though the mind meld that Spock does. Spock, he kind of like he's not granted permission, so he like sneaks off the ship.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
and does his famous Spock hand grip. Paralyzing thing
on the guy who's near the thruster suits.
I'm glad they were able to work that into the movie. But I wanted to mention that sequence because when he goes to do the mind meld, he takes
the thruster suit.
The thruster suit to jettison himself into the V'ger's one of their openings, I guess, that he has to time and go into. I wanted to mention because I like the sequence. This is one of my favorite sequences in the movie. It does remind me a lot of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
So you're talking about the visuals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Visuals and stuff.
That was one of the really positive parts for me as well in this scene, because there probably is a series of matte paintings is what they probably are using, but the visuals are absolutely gorgeous, and it is very reminiscent of 2001.
Talking about the visuals specifically, I know that there's matte painting stuff happening, but there's also like a lot of layers of things that like it's very like surreal, very abstract kind of.
Yeah.
You do get like very like this is a ship, this is like a big ship, but you also get like all these lights bending and doing all these things. And like there's a lot of points in that sequence where I don't like, how did they do this? Like this is like the CG is not really, that wasn't a thing.
Oh yeah, it wasn't very sophisticated back in 79.
And yet him going through V'ger, which V'ger if you're going to talk about it either as a planet or a ship, it's massive in size. It's I think they were saying like 1,000,000 times larger than. I don't think in the movie, but from what I read, it's like 1,000,000 times larger than the Enterprise ship.
Yeah.
So it's just a very large, huge thing. So, but Spock has to get to the what would we call it? The core of V'ger,
Almost like the memory core,
the
yeah.
memory core of it. So he has to travel there, and what I felt watching that was like he's by himself doing this, and like I liken it to like I don't know, going on a solo deep dive or something, or something. The his experience of doing that has to be very like surreal and almost like a hallucination type of trip. But he's like alone by himself doing this. He could get killed easily.
Oh, absolutely.
But that sequence of him going there was just very cool visually. And when he he doesn't successfully mind meld with it, right?
No, he technically does. So what happens is that the reason he was like blown back or kicked back out of the, I think they call it the V'ger orifice, is that it was overstimulation basically. There was so much information that he couldn't handle it. And it like I don't know if he blasted himself back out or what exactly.
I think he was kicked back, but it was pretty. Or he was.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like that. All that information. Through him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just overwhelmed him. I imagine it would, like all that information. So that's light years, and from it to go from potentially the Delta Quadrant back to the Alpha Quadrant is an incredible, vast distance.
Yeah. So one of my favorite sequences in the movie was that, and so very, very cool and impressive. Yes,
I agree that moment is that's probably my favorite moment in the entire movie.
Yeah,
by far,
pretty strong one. So overall, like I thought the movie was okay. I do think it was kind of a well polished episode, story wise. So I didn't really think it was like. I've seen some criticisms online about like some of the aspects of the story being weak, and I can definitely kind of feel that a little bit. A lot of the characters outside of maybe Kirk, they're not really challenged a whole lot.
They really aren't.
That I would like to see in my Star Trek shows because their characters are challenged in some way.
Yeah, usually
on a personal level, in some way. So I didn't really feel that a lot with this movie. So definitely not one of my favorite Star Trek movies, I'd say. But it's because it's a little slow burning. So I'm not sure how much I would want to revisit it, but it was okay. I thought it was okay. Probably
for me, like I said, I think overall a lot of this works for me. It's definitely not my favorite one either, but there's a lot, like the visuals are the biggest thing for this movie. The visuals and the score that accompanies it, I think, are the two best thing this movie has going for it.
Yeah.
I think the storyline, I like the idea of a living computer, or like a living machine. And in fact, so that aspect of the story, the producers at Paramount were not sure that was good enough. They weren't really necessarily in favor of that. So they actually reached out to Isaac Asimov, the incredibly famous science fiction writer who wrote the Foundation series, which has to do with all the three laws of robotics.
Okay, yeah.
Which is like iRobot and those stories. So they reached out to him and said, okay, if he says it's good, then you can do it. And so he read it and he loved the idea of a living computer. So they ended up going with that as being the thing for V'ger. The only thing he didn't really like, he had a suggestion on that there's a moment early in the film where they try to go to warp and they fail they end up going into this kind of anomaly that surrounds the ship, and there's some very weird effects happening, special effects with that particular scene. That scene doesn't really work for me. Visually or a lot of aspects of it. But he felt they called it a wormhole. He felt it should be called a temporal tunnel instead. I can kind of see it as a wormhole because the way, I don't know if you know how the warp engine works. And I had to do kind of some research on this myself.
I know it warps.
That is true. It does indeed warp. From what I remember, so faster than light travel is not possible currently, and it technically isn't within the Star Trek universe either. So what they do, instead of having an engine that can go faster than light, they warp space-time around the ship. So it has to deal with, like, the larger the mass of an object, you kind of see this bend in space, and so the ship by warping space time around itself, almost like a bubble. If you compress it in front and expand it in back, it kind of propels you forward.
Yeah.
So you're moving yourself through space time that way, rather than actually like going faster than light. And so I don't know. I think it's that particular instance that I can see wormhole being an accurate description for it. But I don't know, that particular effect doesn't really work for me because of like they do this weird slowing down sequence, and a thing where like you squint at a light and you can see the beams kind of rolling off. They do that with the characters as well. And
Yeah.
I don't know. Visually, it doesn't work for me in that scene. I will say, as far as like other things that didn't work, the costumes for this movie, like the
Oh, yeah.
uniforms. The uniforms are terrible.
Which is interesting because like I didn't really think about them very much. I saw online that the costumes are very not unique, or they're kind of plain, maybe
Very drab, yeah.
Nothing really distinctive.
Most of them are just straight up gray.
Yeah, yeah. So, but honestly, like when I was watching it, I didn't really think of that too much because, for me, Star Trek, their uniforms weren't. I don't know.
I mean, it's not a central focus, but just from like a fan aspect of someone who's seen
could
like
see that.
all the other uniforms, these uniforms are by far the worst.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm glad that they switched to the more iconic red uniforms in Star Trek 2. So that aspect didn't work for me. The fact that the characters were underutilized was not great. So I don't know. Those are the things, but I still think overall it's a good movie and worth a watch in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say it's worth a watch too, especially if you like. I mean, there's slow burn movies like 2001: Space Odyssey. I'd kind of compare it to would compare it to a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not Star Wars in terms of pacing or action.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more slow, more intellectual, kind of maybe in how you might take it. So it sounds like you were a little bit hotter on the movie than I was. I wasn't. I'm not negative on it.
Right.
But it would be interesting to see like the next movie. Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
Just to see the evolution of the Star Trek movies and just see what they did with it now that I've seen the original film, which I somehow missed and didn't watch.
Well, now you gotta go on a Star Trek marathon, and lucky for you. Oh well, I guess they are all on HBO. I was gonna say, lucky for you, I own all of them.
Well,
but you have access to them anyway.
What a fan.
Like I said, it's definitely not the worst. If I'm ranking Star Trek movies, Nemesis is far below the original motion picture. So before we close out, Devin, do you know what the budget for this movie was?
$10 million.
Ooh, you are far below. It was $35 to $44 million.
Okay.
And then in box office, originally on opening weekend, it did $11.9 million.
Okay.
Just during that opening weekend. And then overall, domestically, did $82 million, and worldwide, $139. So, I mean, it definitely made up its budget. It made money. And at the time, it wasn't necessarily considered a commercial flop by any means.
Sounds like it didn't do Star Wars numbers, though.
Probably not. But, to be fair, it's its own different thing, and it very much wanted to be a different movie.
Well, if it was truly a failure, we wouldn't have Wrath of Khan. We
That is true,
other movies, so.
and thank God it wasn't, because there are so many. Like, if it had failed, we might not even have the Next Generation or any of the subsequent series. It might have died with the original series and the animated series.
Yeah,
and that would be very sad. But so I think that brings us to an end of another episode of Nerds Now Playing. You can find other episodes of Nerds Now Playing on our YouTube channel, and also if you want to, and you should, check out the work of Feely Creative at feelycreative.com. And until next time, play on, nerds.